The 2025 elections was a show of true colors and a test of star power. After the polls have closed and the numbers pour in, we look into what worked and didn't work in campaigns. We have in the studio this morning Dr. Gary Ador Dionisio, Dean of College of St. Benilde School of Diplomacy and Governance and Senior Advisory of WR Advisory Group. It's a beautiful day. Sir Gary, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, and Nick and Paula as well.
The conversation was already interesting off the air because we're talking about all the surprises, those unexpected twists and turns that we had this midterm election. I want to start with what were those unexpected events, these surprises that were notable for you?
Well, number one, I think aside from the election of Bam Aquino and Pangilinan, despite their not performing very well from the reputable survey firms, I believe it's the election of Akbayan as being the number one party list at this day and age, and even garnering the most highest number of votes in the entire party list election when it was introduced in 1998. So there are many surprises as well. No? Perhaps I can attribute that to the hard work of its Senator Risa Hontiveros, who have seen her consistency from the Pogo issues, Pastilla scam, despite all the attacks against her. Yeah. And of course, Akbayan represents a broad range of candidates that represents cross-class and cross-sectors. No? So you have human rights lawyer, Chad Jokno, you have Percy Sendanya, who represents LGBT, and you have the third nominee from Mindanao, it's also Moro. So, and what is also surprising is that party list votes, you only have to choose one, right?
Yes.
So it's somehow very significant to have the result of election. And although on the other hand, you will also, the second highest party list group is Duterte Youth. Yeah. So you see a very polarizing, contrasting, and an interjecting of different ideas from this election.
Yeah, mahirap talaga i-analyze, especially when you look at, again, how opposite in terms of polarities yung Akbayan and Duterte Youth in their top one and top two, with Akbayan being surprised up top. But another big surprise here is that kapag nakita natin yung mga celebrity candidates, in particular, very mixed results despite high spending. Let's take a look at si Bong Revilla in particular, Willie Revillame. They were not even, well, they weren't as close as they would have expected to be in that top 12.
Well, aside from that, you look at also some party list group who also employ celebrities and influencers. They're not faring very well. You know, if you look at this, only few of them, Solid North, only I think si Maha Salvador ata yan, ako Bicol, si Jericho Rosales. But aside from, other than that, look at, for example, ang probinsyano ni Piolo Pascual, it's not all performing very well. So, to some extent, there are some learning opportunity for this election that we are now more interested and invested to examine the platforms, the programs, and the message. Not only the people who endorses this party. So that's very important for me to take note in this election.
And I think one of the most important lessons that candidates had to take away from this election specifically is the change in campaign shifts. Because this year, they had to use a lot of social media. How do you think that influenced this year's election? And which candidate or candidates would you say used it the best, authentically and innovatively?
Well, at this juncture, we already noticed, for example, the rise of social media vis-a-vis traditional media. In fact, there were studies, I just forgot the firm that conducted it, that people are generating more news somehow between social media and traditional media. So masyado nang malapit. So, and I agree, the use of social media is very important. I also attributed the role of Akbayan there. I think they have a very good social media campaign. Ang galing, they also manage all these influencers across. So, would you imagine Ann Curtis will campaign for them? So I try to monitor their performance for the last X number of years. This time, they really gathered a lot of social media influencers and celebrities. But of course, there are also some failures also who utilize social media, and because it lacks you a clear message. Tingin ko yun ang nawawala eh. Kung hindi maliwanag ang mensahe mo, despite all your spending, all your boosting, all your trolling, to be even included that, and people will not clearly understand your message at hindi nagmamark, no? So people will not vote for you, no? So yan yung nangyari. For example nga, yung mga celebrities natin, kasi kung ang bilangan ng celebrities, hanggang ngayon, sayang nga, si Willie Rebillame, no? So yung popularity niya hindi naman nag-translate, including also other celebrities. Diba? So these are interesting note to examine further.
In fact, si Bong Revilla nga came out with a statement that he was actually surprised that he didn't make it to the Magic 12. So he wasn't expecting this turnout. According to the PPCRV, this midterm election, 80.27% yung national voter turnout, which compared to the previous midterm election, mas maganda yung numbers this year. So what is the implication of this?
Well, if historically, midterm elections is not that high compared with the national elections. No?
Yeah.
But this time around, again, I think many people now have been invested. Had the word, they're interested, invested, no? And they somehow thinking what will happen, diba? To our future, no? Not only present nga, kasi after this election, people are they're still looking for price of rice, 20 kilos, the problem of unemployment, now accidents, for example, on the streets. So these are daily issues that we need to address as well. No?
But, Prof, you mentioned that it probably shows that people are more invested this time. That's why there's this good voter turnout in the midterm elections. Do you also feel that since majority of the voters, registered voters this year are Gen Zs and millennials, do you think that this is like a sign that really the younger generation are invested and they really want their voices to be heard?
Well, definitely. I completely agree with that ad. No? And again, if you will notice the surveys when it was conducted before the elections, no, it only provide a different snapshot. Again, there's a misconception the survey predicts outcomes. That's true. Surveys are scientifically conducted and only provide an outcome of a particular time and moment. That's why survey questions basically are designed if elections will happen today. So we're talking about today. So therefore, the result of elections tells otherwise that, youth vote, particularly the millennials and Generation Z, really push back their interests to some extent. Of course, it's not that as perfect as perhaps they would imagine, because they might some have candidates that they really wanted, why are you there? No? But on the other hand, it's a good sign. I mean, it's a good sign as well.
I want to go in on the campaigns again because you mentioned a while ago that social media played a big factor, and I want to compare that to what we saw a while ago when it comes to traditional media, because we actually have a few figures on the ad spending of some of the candidates. It's interesting to know that some of the higher spenders did not actually end up making it to the Magic 12. Of course, we're going to focus on centers here. You take a look at Francis Tolentino, you take a look at Benhur Abalos, Bong Revilla, Willie Revilla not on this list. But then you take a look at that. With Camille Villar, Amy Marcos, Abby Binay didn't make it either. The top two, Villar and Marcos, actually barely made it. And what does this say about traditional media, first and foremost?
Well, in terms of the ad spending, I mean, at the end of the day, people will listen to your message. Still, message matters. And of course, it also value-added the character of the candidates as well. No, you might have a good candidate, but he has a problem with message. Okay. On the other hand, you have a very good candidate, but he does not speak very well. So it's a combination of many things. So it doesn't mean that you bid a lot of advertisement, a lot of campaigns or using social and traditional media, but people have problems of understanding what we stand for. For example, Francis Tolentino. If Francis Tolentino, perhaps my idea is, if already clearly speak that he's against the Chinese intrusion in the West Philippine Sea, it might add. My sense, but he only speak that during the last week of the campaign. So kung dinila niya maigi yun, baka nakatulong pa yun
Yeah.
to generate more support.
If the message was pushed forward, of course.
But
we
very
want-
late. Para sa akin, parang very late.
Yeah, I mean, like we also saw people, at least online, make fun of candidates who they felt did not have messages in terms of yung plataforma nila. But apart from that, you talk to a lot of these winning candidates and even the winning party lists, they're going to tell you a couple of things when it comes to yung winning formula nila. Sasabihin nila na it is one, social media, ground efforts.
Yeah.
But then another
Ground war
interesting thing,
and,
grassroots. Grassroots were a part of it. Bam Aquino in particular has a very funny way of describing his grassroots. He calls them the Bam Aquino Youth Action Group o yung acronym po yun. And then you take a look yung mga party list, they have been working with college students and people who weren't even allowed to vote yet until they were able to get there. So is this the new way of campaigning?
If I may share, 2 weeks before, or actually starting last April, my school of the De La Salle College of Cignal, conducted a voters education campaign to different universities. So we hit Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. No? And every time that we present for example, the survey of WR numero, and people will, show its remorse and disgust. But when we discuss, for example, this guy, but if you mention, for example, the name of Bam Aquino, people will jeer, and we talk about Kiko Pangilinan. People, they're really, the venue's really about to collapse. So that's their excitement. And, well, to some extent, I did not, personally, I didn't put more attention on that.
Yeah.
But when the result happened, so I went back to what we did, for example, because we went to CLSU, we went to Visayas State University, to what you call this, Batangas State University as well. So key universities, those in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, we received the same affirmation from Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan. So, of course, we dismissed it because we thought, it's only a youth vote. But all of a sudden, there was a ravage of votes coming from the millennials and the Gen Z from this result.
Did we see in this election new forms of disinformation or manipulation using social media, especially with AI being so prevalent now with fake quotes, deep fakes?
Yeah, there are.
What can you say about that?
Well, there are. In fact, the malign influence, for example, is pursued by the so-called Chinese government to denounce, for example, our legitimacy in West Philippine Sea, also been proliferated during the campaign.
Yeah.
There also, for example, in the hearing of Senator Francis Tolentino, I don't know if you remember that, there was a firm who been commissioned by the Chinese embassy to promote their programs as well. So I think that's also a tip of an iceberg.
Yeah.
Perhaps there are a lot of influencers right now who managed to train in China, and they admitted that during the hearing in the Quadcom. They went there to attend a seminar. So perhaps they might be included in the sphere of so-called malign influencer in our country today.
Yeah, you look at the influence that influencers have. You look at how people are trying to manipulate the narrative. But there was also a narrative that we saw from the pre-election surveys. Some people were panicking. Some people were like, okay, maybe I have to change the way that we're campaigning or looking at things. But then the results from the actual election compared to the surveys were varied, to say the least. We talked about it a while ago, but I want to dive into it a bit more. The companies actually did say that they have to look at their methodologies again because of the discrepancy of this. Going forward, our reliability on the surveys, especially towards the next election, the national elections, do you think that will change things?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, as I also explained, we have to remember that when surveys were conducted, it is very much applicable at that time. It was, the field work. So we have this field work. So survey, if you design the questions and then you conduct a field work. So when field work happened, and then this will be processed, it will take some time, a week or two. And then here you go, election analysis will be provided. So you see the time and motion studies that included from the time it was survey. For example, I think the last survey that was conducted sometime in the end of April.
Yeah.
So from May 1 to May 12, 25% is still undecided at the time. Okay. So there might be some factors. Perhaps endorsement from local politicians. Yun nga problem, for example, ng Alyansa, I think they have a very good chance kung tutusin kasi they have the incumbent eh. But I think yung si Toby Tiangco, yung campaign manager, mukhang hindi na maximize all the opportunities that they have. Medyo may failure din doon kung tutusin kasi you have big names pero did Congressman Toby Tiangco really coordinated with all the machinery? Baka hindi kasi sabi nga ni Senator Ping Lacson, medyo may failure in terms of voters delivery yung administration.
Yeah, we were talking also about how this could be a VP Sara versus Marcos. Really, that's a narrative. In fact, people are thinking that still might be the case come the next elections. But it feels like there are more soft voters out there, or at least undecided, as you mentioned a while ago. Are political colors, are political factions still the end-all, be-all? Nakita naman natin yan, especially in previous elections when you were a Duterte voter, normally straight. If you were for Lenny at that time or yung opposition, normally straight kayo. But right now, because of the variance, are there more soft voters, or are you hard coded for factions right now, or has that changed?
Well, my initial assessment, for example, those are results of the unofficial pa naman kasi, no? Makita mo, for example, in Mindanao, you will see a lot of, the Duterte really winning in that
Mindanao.
area.
Yeah,
in
may black
Mindanao.
voting pa rin.
No? But the rest, you will see some mixtures. Okay? So makita mo maigi doon yung perhaps a combination of soft voters become hard at the end of the day, or they decide to choose. So may volatility pa din in that sense. But again, ang crucial dito will be what will mark yung kanilang the day that they're going to vote. No? Ito yung mensaheng maaalala talaga nila. At tingin nila ito yung tama for them. No? Unlike in Mindanao, kasi I traveled in Mindanao these past elections for to do some lectures, no? And then of course I will ask them. Talagang medyo solid din talaga sila. And then I also look at some of the FGDs conducted, no? Iba rin talaga ang pagtingin nila, for example, sa West Philippine Sea. So medyo may regionalism factor din na dapat natin consider. But of course, these are still under discussions. So we have to have a scientific and rigorous data gathering and methodological approach to generate a complete and comprehensive discussions and results of this election. No? But nevertheless, these are snapshots that will perhaps guide us. No?
Prof, we're running out of time, but before we let you go, I want to go back to campaigns that worked and didn't work. What do you think are the lessons that can be taken from the outcome of this midterm elections? Kasi parang nakikita natin na social media versus traditional media, and we're seeing that the trend is like people look at the message, so hindi na gumagana yung song and dance number. So what do you think are the lessons that we can, or the politicians can take from the midterm elections that probably they can use for the 2028 elections?
Well, I have a academic approach on that. I call campaign continuity plan. So for a campaign continuity plan, the best thing to do is to review and assess your performance, including FGD with your team. Pero very prominent talaga ngayon yung preparations. Okay. More than anything else. You might have a good message, but at the end of the day, the time is your enemy. That's a big challenge. You might have resources, but at the end of the day, you don't have a good strategy. Again, that's a problem. So preparation matters. Planning is everything from the onset. And of course, a good candidate can only be a good candidate if he has a very good machinery. Yeah. And of course, the volunteers as well. No? Ako kasi, nakita ko yung election nga Dakbayan, wala namang pera yan. Pero they have these dedicated volunteers, even celebrities, campaigning for them house to house. So would you imagine? No, sila Pokwang, and other social media influencers. Nakita ko sa social media, grabe. So they just believe in the intention and the platform of this party, yung Akbayan.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Gary Ador Dionisio, thank you for joining us, sir.